up next, it's I Am Weasel, followed by Space Ghost Coast to Coast on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Space Ghost Coast to Coast, followed by Late Night Black and White on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Late Night Black and White, followed by Oh Canada on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Oh Canada, followed by Droopy on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Droopy, followed by Popeye on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Popeye, followed by Yogi Bear on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Yogi Bear, followed by Huckleberry Hound on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Huckleberry Hound, followed by Adam Ant on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Adam Ant, followed by Secret Squirrel on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Secret Squirrel, followed by Rocky and Bullwinkle on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Rocky and Bullwinkle, followed by Dudley Do-Right on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Dudley Do-Right, followed by Cartoon-a-Doodle-Doo on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Cartoon-a-Doodle-Doo, followed by Tom and Jerry Kids on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Tom and Jerry Kids, followed by Dexter's Laboratory on Cartoon Network. Followed by Alvin and the Chipmunks on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Alvin and the Chipmunks, followed by Tiny Toons on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Alvin and the Chipmunks, followed by Tiny Toons on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Tiny Toons, followed by the What a Cartoon Show on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's the What a Cartoon Show, followed by Scooby Movies on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Scooby Movies, followed by Smurfs on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Smurfs, followed by the Flintstones on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Smurfs, followed by the Flintstones on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's the Flintstones, followed by the Jetsons on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's the Acme Hour, followed by Captain Planet on Cartoon Network.
Coming up next, it's Captain Planet, followed by The Real Adventures of Johnny Quest on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's The Real Adventures of Johnny Quest, followed by Toonami on Cartoon Network.
Coming up next, it's Toonami, followed by Batman on Cartoon Network.
Coming up next, it's Batman, followed by Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? On Cartoon Network.
Coming up next, it's Scooby-Doo, followed by Dexter's Laboratory on Cartoon Network. up next, it's Dexter's Laboratory, followed by Ed, and Eddie on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Ed, and Eddie, followed by Cow and Chicken on Cartoon Network. Up next, it's Cow and Chicken, followed by the Bugs and Daffy Show on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's the Bugs and Daffy Show, followed by Tom and Jerry on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Tom and Jerry, followed by the Flintstones on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's the Flintstones, followed by Ed, and Eddie on Cartoon Network. Coming up next, it's Ed, and Eddie, followed by Cow and Chicken on Cartoon Network.
Coming up next, it's Cow and Chicken, followed by Batman on Cartoon Network.